If you have been dragging your feet on building any kind of food reserve, that window of opportunity is closing faster than most people realize. What is unfolding right now in the Middle East is not just another geopolitical headline to scroll past. It has direct consequences for what ends up on your dinner table and what you pay for it. I am your host here at Sustainable Survival Hub. Today we are cutting through the noise and talking about something that genuinely matters to every single person watching this. The situation involving Iran and the Strait of Hormuz is not just an oil story. It never was. It is a food story. It is a grocery bill story. It is a story about whether average families are going to be able to afford to eat the same way they do today, 6 or 8 months from now. Stick around, because we are going to break this down completely. We will cover what is actually happening, why it matters more than the evening news is letting on, and exactly what steps you should take right now. Not someday, not when things get worse, now. Make sure you are subscribed before we go any further. Hit that notification bell too. Situations like this develop fast, and you do not want to be the last person to know when something significant shifts. What is actually happening and why it matters? Let us start with the basics so everyone is on the same page. US and Israeli military strikes on Iran have effectively shut down normal operations through the Strait of Hormuz. That is the narrow stretch of water that roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through every single day. Now, every major news outlet is covering this from an energy angle. Gas prices, crude oil futures, energy markets, that is what gets the airtime. But focusing only on oil is like looking at a house fire and only worrying about the curtains. There is a much bigger problem underneath that most people are not talking about. The disruption to that shipping lane is triggering a cascade of problems that flow directly into the global food system. We are going to talk about each of them in detail because understanding the mechanism is what helps you take the right action. The first problem: fertilizer is getting choked off. Here is something that should concern every person who eats food, which is everyone. We are sitting right at the beginning of spring planting season. This is the exact moment when farmers across the country are deciding what to plant, how much to plant, and whether they can afford the inputs needed to do it. Fertilizer is the backbone of modern agriculture. Without it, yields collapse. There is no version of industrial-scale farming that works without consistent fertilizer supply. And here is the problem. Iran and Russia are both significant exporters of fertilizers and the raw materials used to produce them. With shipping routes being disrupted and sanctions tightening, the supply of these materials is getting squeezed at the worst possible moment. Farmers are not just facing higher prices, some are facing outright unavailability of certain products in their region. Think about what that means downstream. When a farmer cannot get the fertilizer they need at a price that makes sense, they have a few options. They plant less, they switch to lower input crops that yield fewer calories, or they take on debt hoping prices improve. None of those options are good for the food supply, none of them are good for food prices at the grocery store, and none of those consequences show up immediately. They show up at harvest time. They show up 6, 7, 8 months from now when the shelves should be restocked and they are not. This is not speculation. This is basic agricultural economics. Disrupt the inputs at planting time, and you disrupt the output at harvest time. It is that simple. The second problem: cooking oils are about to get expensive. This one hits people where they feel it fast, and most people do not see it coming until it is already at the checkout counter. Palm oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, canola oil. These are not niche specialty products. They are in almost everything processed or packaged: bread, crackers, salad dressing, margarine, snack foods, frozen meals. The list goes on and on. When shipping costs surge because routes are being disrupted and rerouted, the cost of moving these products from where they are produced to where they are processed goes up. When it costs more to ship, it costs more to produce. When it costs more to produce, the price at the shelf goes up. We are already seeing this beginning to move. The price jumps are not fully reflected at retail yet, because there is always a lag between what happens at the commodity level and what shows up on the grocery store shelf. But that lag is measured in weeks, not months, not years, weeks. If you use cooking oil regularly, and virtually every household does, buying some extra supply right now before that price increase fully hits retail is just basic financial sense. This is not panic buying. This is buying ahead of a price increase that is already baked into the supply chain. The third problem: sugar processing is getting disrupted. This one is a little less obvious but equally real. Sugar refining is not a simple process. It depends on specific supply chains for raw materials, specific shipping routes, and facilities that operate on tight margins. When those shipping routes get disrupted and raw material costs spike, refineries face delays, they face shortages of specific inputs, they face cost increases that get passed directly to buyers. Sugar is in more products than most people realize, and when processing gets backed up or costs spike, that ripple moves fast through packaged foods, baked goods, beverages, and anything else that relies on refined sugar as an input. Industry analysts who follow this stuff professionally are not being reassuring about the timeline. The word being used is months, not weeks, when it comes to how long these disruptions could persist. That is important. This is not a situation where things snap back to normal in a few days. If this is making sense to you and helping you understand what is actually going on, take 5 seconds and hit that like button. Subscribe if you have not already. Leave a comment below telling me what you are seeing at your local stores. Are prices already moving in your area? I read every comment, and it helps all of us track what is happening on the ground. Why this crisis is different from normal supply chain hiccups. A lot of people hear news like this and think, yeah, supply chains get disrupted all the time. They sort it out, prices go up for a bit, and then come back down, life goes on. That thinking is not entirely wrong historically, but this situation has characteristics that make it more serious than the average disruption. Let us break down exactly why. The timing is about as bad as it gets. Farming is not like manufacturing. You cannot just ramp up production when demand increases. There are seasons, there are planting windows. Miss the planting window, and you wait an entire year for another shot. We are right at the start of that critical window. Fertilizer shortages and cost spikes happening right now do not just affect this year's crop. They affect the decisions farmers make about next year. They affect whether marginal land gets planted at all. They affect crop selection and rotation decisions that have long-term consequences. The timing of this disruption relative to the agricultural calendar is genuinely bad. If this had happened in October, the damage to this crop cycle would be more limited. Happening now, at planting time, maximizes the downstream impact. Multiple problems are hitting simultaneously. What makes this different from a typical disruption is that we are not dealing with one problem. We are dealing with several problems that reinforce each other. Energy costs go up because of the Strait of Hormuz closure. Higher energy costs make fertilizer more expensive to produce and transport. Higher fertilizer costs make food more expensive to grow. Higher energy costs also make food more expensive to transport from farm to processor to store. Higher shipping costs from rerouted vessels add another layer of cost. And all of this is happening while the JBS beef processing situation is creating its own separate squeeze on protein availability. These are not independent problems. Each one makes the others worse. That is what a cascade looks like. And cascades are significantly harder to reverse than single-point disruptions. History tells us this gets real ugly. We do not have to guess about what fertilizer supply disruptions do to food prices. We have seen it before. The 2008 food crisis is the most recent clear example. Fertilizer costs spiked, shipping was disrupted, energy costs ran high, and food prices globally jumped 40 to 80% in a relatively short period. Grocery shelves in some areas got genuinely thin, food banks were overwhelmed, families that were already stretched financially got crushed. People who had some food storage weathered that period significantly better than people who were living paycheck to paycheck with nothing in reserve. That is not an accident. That is preparation working exactly the way it is supposed to. The conditions right now rhyme closely with what preceded that 2008 spike. Not identically, but closely enough that dismissing this as noise would be a mistake. The store inventory buffer is temporary. Here is the thing that a lot of people do not understand about how grocery stores work. What you see on the shelf right now was largely purchased and moved through the supply chain weeks or months ago. Stores operate on inventory that was bought at pre-crisis prices. That buffer exists, but it is not permanent. As current inventory sells through and stores go back to replenish, they are buying at the new higher prices. Those higher costs eventually hit the shelf price. Right now, today, you are still buying from that buffer. You are still buying at prices that were set before this crisis fully developed. That window is real, but it is finite. It is measured in weeks, not months. Once the current inventory cycles through, you will be paying the new price. Acting now means taking advantage of that buffer. Waiting means paying more for the same things. A fourth issue, water and agricultural infrastructure. Let us talk about something that does not get enough attention in these conversations. Global food disruptions do not happen in isolation from other stresses on the agricultural system. Right now, several major agricultural regions are dealing with water stress, drought conditions, or infrastructure challenges that compound the effects of supply chain disruption. When you add fertilizer shortages to already stressed crop conditions, you get yield reductions that multiply rather than add. California, which produces a disproportionate share of fresh produce for the U.S. market, is still managing ongoing water allocation disputes. Parts of the Midwest are seeing unusual weather patterns that affect soil conditions heading into planting. None of this would be catastrophic on its own, but stacked on top of everything else we are discussing, it adds to the pressure on the domestic food supply. It reduces the margin for error that usually allows the system to absorb external shocks. When you are prepping, understanding this kind of layered risk is important. It is not just the Strait of Hormuz, that is the trigger point, but it is pulling on a system that already has tension in it. A fifth issue, labor disruptions in processing. Here is another piece of the puzzle that is not getting mainstream coverage. Food processing is labor-intensive, and the processing sector has been dealing with labor challenges for several years running. When costs spike due to energy and ingredient prices, food processors face a brutal choice. They can absorb the costs and take hits to already thin margins. They can raise prices and risk losing volume, or they can reduce output to manage costs. Many choose some combination of the last two. That means less product flowing to stores and higher prices on what does flow through. Both outcomes are bad for consumers who are not prepared. Processing bottlenecks also tend to hit certain categories harder than others. Specialty or premium products often get cut first, then mid-tier products. The basic staples tend to hold on longest, but even they eventually get affected if the cost pressures are severe enough. A sixth issue, retail consolidation amplifies disruptions. Most people do not think about the structure of grocery retail when they think about food security, but it matters. The grocery sector in the US is dominated by a relatively small number of large chains. That consolidation creates efficiencies in normal times, but it also creates fragility when things go wrong. When a major distributor or supplier has a problem, it hits a huge percentage of the stores in a region simultaneously. There is less redundancy than there used to be. The regional grocery store that sourced locally and could absorb national supply chain shocks is largely gone, replaced by national chains with national supply chains. This means disruptions that in an earlier era might have affected some stores in some regions now have a tendency to show up broadly and simultaneously. If you have been to multiple stores in your area during a shortage and found the same gaps everywhere, you have seen this dynamic in action. Hit that like button if this is landing for you. Subscribe so you catch every update as this situation develops. And drop a comment below telling me what your biggest gap in food storage is right now. Let us figure this out together. Now let us talk about what you actually do. Enough analysis. Let us get to the part that matters. What actions you take right now, in what order, and how to do it regardless of your budget. This week, the non-negotiables. Shelf-stable protein first. Protein is going to be the category that gets expensive fastest. The combination of supply chain disruption and the JBS beef processing situation means protein prices are going to move. You want to be ahead of that. Canned chicken, beef, and fish are your immediate priorities. They store well, they are versatile, and they are still reasonably priced right now. Grab several cans per person in your household. Dried beans and lentils are the other critical item here. They are cheap, they store for years when kept properly, they are calorie-dense, and they are nutritious. A large bag of dried beans costs almost nothing compared to what it provides. Buy more than you think you need. Peanut butter. This is one of the most calorie-dense, shelf-stable, reasonably priced foods available. It has fat, protein, and calories all in one. If you can only buy a few things this week, peanut butter should be on that short list. Nuts and protein powder round out this category. Nuts are calorie-dense and store reasonably well. Protein powder stores for a long time and provides a concentrated protein source when meat is unavailable or too expensive. Cooking oils and fats second. We talked about why this category is going to get expensive fast. Act on that information. Coconut oil is the best choice for long-term storage because it does not go rancid quickly. Olive oil in dark containers is another solid choice. Vegetable shortening has a very long shelf life. Ghee or clarified butter stores much longer than regular butter. Get more of each of these than you think you need. Oil is something most households use constantly, and running out in a crisis is a genuine problem for cooking almost anything. Grains and carbs third. These are your calorie foundation. When things get tight, carbohydrates are what keep people fed and functional. White rice stores significantly longer than brown rice due to the fat content in brown rice. If you are buying for long-term storage, white rice is the right choice. A large bag of white rice costs very little per calorie and stores for a very long time when kept cool and dry. Pasta is another excellent choice. It stores well, it is versatile, and it pairs with almost anything. Oats are nutritious, store well, and are extremely cheap per calorie. Wheat berries or flour give you the ability to make bread, which is both nutritious and morale-boosting in difficult times. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, building depth. Start growing something, anything. You do not need a farm. You do not need a large backyard. You need a pot, some dirt, some seeds, and sunlight. Lettuce and spinach can go from seed to harvest in about 30 days. Radishes are ready in 25 days. Green onions can be regrown indefinitely from the bottoms of onions you have already used. Herbs like basil and parsley grow fast and add value to basic meals. Every bit of food you grow yourself is food you are not paying retail prices for. It is also food that is not dependent on any supply chain. Start now, even if it is small. The habit and the knowledge you build are worth more than the actual calories produced. Get serious about cooking skills. A well-stocked pantry does not help you if you do not know how to cook from basic ingredients. This is the moment to close that gap. Learn to make bread from scratch. It is not complicated, and it is enormously valuable. Learn rice and bean combinations that are nutritious and filling. Learn basic preservation techniques like pickling, canning, and drying. These are skills that once learned do not go away and make you significantly more resilient. YouTube has thousands of tutorials on all of this. There is no shortage of information. What there is sometimes a shortage of is motivation to learn before you actually need the skill. Build that motivation now while you have time to practice without pressure. Build your local network. Supply chain resilience is not just about what you store in your house. It is about relationships. Get to know your local farmers market. Talk to producers. Find out what they grow and when. Consider joining a CSA, a community-supported agriculture program, where you pay a farmer at the beginning of the season and receive regular boxes of produce throughout the growing season. When national supply chains get disrupted, local relationships become enormously valuable. The farmer you know personally may be able to sell you things directly that are not available in stores. The food co-op you belong to may have access to sources that major chains do not. These relationships take time to build. Starting now, even if nothing bad happens, is not wasted effort. You end up with better food, stronger community connections, and resilience you can actually rely on. Over the next 3 to 6 months, thinking long-term, watch the price trends carefully. Do not just shop on autopilot. Pay attention to what prices are doing at your regular stores. Keep a rough mental note, or an actual note, of what you are paying for staples. When you see consistent increases in a category, that is your signal to buy deeper in that category before prices climb further. You are essentially using price trend information to time your purchases more intelligently. This does not require fancy spreadsheets or complex systems, just awareness. Paying attention to prices is a habit that saves money in normal times and can be genuinely critical in disrupted times. Build a living, rotating stock. Food storage is not a one-time event. It is a system, and a system requires maintenance. The principle is simple. First in, first out. Use your oldest items first. When you use something from storage, replace it. Your storage should be constantly cycling, not sitting static until some emergency arrives. This approach keeps your stored food fresh and edible. It also means you are actually familiar with cooking and using everything you store, which matters. The worst time to figure out how to cook dried lentils is when that is all you have available. Follow agricultural news. Most people follow financial news or political news, but ignore agricultural news. That is a mistake for anyone serious about food security. Crop reports, drought conditions, planting intention data, commodity price movements, these things tell you what is coming at the grocery store before it gets there. The information is public and freely available. USDA releases regular reports. Agricultural news sites cover this stuff in depth. Understanding what is happening at the farm level gives you 6 to 8 months of advance notice about what is going to happen at the store level. That lead time is the entire ballgame when it comes to being prepared rather than reactive. Develop a water security plan. Clean water is so fundamental that people often underestimate how quickly things go wrong without it. A food storage plan that does not include water storage is incomplete. The general guideline is 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic sanitation. That number goes up in hot weather or if anyone in your household has elevated needs. 2 weeks of water storage for your household is a minimum baseline. More is better. Water filtration capability is equally important. A quality gravity filter or portable filter gives you the ability to make water from uncertain sources safe to drink. This dramatically expands your resilience beyond whatever you have stored. Take a second and smash that like button if this is giving you real, actionable information. Subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss updates as this situation develops. Comment below with what action you are going to take first. I want to know what you are prioritizing. How to do this on any budget. Let us be direct about something. Not everyone watching this has several $100s they can drop on emergency food supplies this week. That is reality, and pretending otherwise does not help anybody. Here is how you approach this at different budget levels. At $50, spend about $15 on a 20-pound bag of white rice. Spend $8 on a 5-pound bag of dried beans. Spend about $12 on a couple of large bottles of cooking oil. Spend the remaining $15 on peanut butter and a few cans of fish. That is roughly 2 to 3 weeks of basic calories for one person. It is not exciting, it is not diverse, but it is functional and it is better than having nothing. If $50 is your limit this week, this is how you spend it most effectively. At $100, double the quantities above and add $20 of canned meats, $10 of pasta and jarred sauce, and $10 of oats and flour. Now you are looking at a month to 6 weeks of solid food security for one person. You have protein variety, you have carbohydrate variety, and you have the cooking fats to make it all edible and calorie dense. At $200 or more, at this level you can start adding freeze-dried options, which have a much longer shelf life and more nutritional variety. You can start buying in bulk from restaurant supply stores or warehouse clubs, which drops your cost per unit significantly. You can also start adding specialty items, spices, comfort foods, and things that make stored food more psychologically sustainable over a longer period. Morale matters in extended situations. Having some variety and some foods you actually enjoy makes a real difference. The gradual approach. If you cannot do any significant spending this week, but you can do something every week, here is a simple 4-week plan. Week 1, focus entirely on grains and rice. Just buy more of those than you normally would. Week 2, shift focus to proteins, canned meats, beans, peanut butter. Week 3, cooking oils and fats. Week 4, canned goods and anything else on your priority list. By the end of 4 weeks, you have built meaningful food security incrementally without any single week feeling overwhelming. The important thing is consistency. Show up every week and add something. Building knowledge as a preparedness asset. Here is something that does not get said enough in preparedness content. Knowledge is a form of storage. Skills are a form of storage. A person who knows how to preserve food has effectively expanded their storage capacity without needing more physical space. A person who knows how to identify and use wild edible plants has a food source that requires no supply chain at all. A person who knows basic first aid has medical capability that does not depend on a well-stocked pharmacy. Invest in knowledge alongside investing in physical supplies. Read books on food preservation, take a first aid course, learn about your local ecosystem and what is edible in it. These investments have zero expiration date and cannot be consumed, lost, or stolen. Community knowledge is equally valuable. Knowing that your neighbor is a nurse, that the person 2 streets over has a large garden and is willing to trade, that your local mechanic can keep older vehicles running when parts are scarce. This kind of social knowledge is a genuine survival asset. Managing the psychological side of preparedness. Let us talk about something that rarely comes up in these conversations but matters enormously. There is a psychological cost to paying close attention to crisis situations. If you are reading everything, watching every update, and thinking about worst-case scenarios constantly, it takes a toll. It creates anxiety. It can tip over into something that is genuinely harmful to your mental health and your relationships. Preparedness is supposed to reduce your anxiety, not amplify it. The whole point is that you take the actions available to you, you build your resilience, and then you can follow events with less fear because you have done what you can do. If you find that following this stuff is making you more anxious rather than less, that is a signal to step back. Take the physical actions, build the storage, develop the skills, and then give yourself permission to not refresh the news every hour. Prepared people are generally calmer in crisis situations, not more panicked. If your preparedness activities are making you more panicked, recalibrate. You are doing it wrong. Your action plan right now, this minute. Let us close with something concrete. When this video ends, here is exactly what you do. Step 1. Take a real inventory of what you have. Walk through your pantry. Check your freezer. Look in your storage areas. Be honest about what is there and how long it would actually last your household. Step 2. Identify your biggest gaps. Where are you most vulnerable? Protein? Cooking fat? Grains? Pick the 2 or 3 categories where you have the least coverage. Step 3. Make a specific shopping list. Not a vague intention to buy more food. An actual list with actual items and actual quantities targeted to your budget. Step 4. Shop this week, not when you get around to it. This week. The window we have been discussing is real, and it is finite. Step 5. Start documenting what you see at stores. Are shelves full or thin? Are prices moving? Are there limits on purchases? This information is useful to you and useful to share with this community. Step 6. Tell one person in your life about this, not to scare them, to give them the same opportunity to prepare that you are taking. Family, close friends, people you actually care about. Share the information responsibly and let them make their own decisions. Step 7. Think about what skill you are going to develop over the next month. Not supplies, skill. Pick one and commit to it. Bread making, food preservation, gardening basics, first aid, whatever feels most valuable given your situation. The bottom line, here is the honest truth about all of this. Nobody can predict exactly how severe this situation will get or exactly how long it will last. Anyone who tells you they know precisely is selling something. What we can say with confidence is that the conditions are in place for significant food price increases over the coming months. The mechanisms are real and documented. The historical parallels are clear. The timeline for when impacts hit retail is short. Given all of that, taking reasonable steps to build some food security makes sense regardless of how the situation ultimately develops. If things get worse than expected, you are protected. If things turn out less severe, you have a well-stocked pantry and lower grocery bills for the next several months as you use what you bought. The downside of preparing when it turns out to be unnecessary is minimal. The downside of not preparing when it turns out to be necessary is severe. That asymmetry is the whole argument for preparedness in a single sentence. The goal here has never been to make you afraid. Fear without action is useless. Fear that motivates action and then recedes once action has been taken is functional. Take the action. Build the security. Then watch the news without the pit in your stomach. Knowledge plus action equals security. That is the formula. You now have the knowledge. The action part is on you. Stay informed. Stay prepared. I will see you in the next video. If this helped you, smash that like button. Subscribe for more breaking analysis and practical preparedness advice. Ring that notification bell so you catch every update. And drop a comment below telling me what you are going to do first. Let us build this community of prepared, informed people together.